Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 423 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is determination. Our quote of the day comes to us from Zig Ziglar. I believe success is achieved by ordinary people with extraordinary determination. We can't thank you enough for listening to our podcast. For those of you that have subscribed, shared, and left us a review, we truly appreciate that. If you have yet to subscribe or leave us a review, we would ask if you could please do so, as that really and truly helps us reach a much wider audience. Thank you. I had a great time speaking with our guest today. Not only was he incredibly transparent and vulnerable, but his podcast, which is titled The No Snooze Podcast, could not fit any better with our no quit message. I know you will enjoy hearing from Dave Reggina. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Dave, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thank you, brother. Chris, I'm happy to be here. Very grateful for the opportunity. The message of, no quit living in general is something that resonates, with me, just in my personal life, my personal brands and all that. So kudos to what you're doing, man. And thank you for bringing me on.
Likewise. And for those that maybe are not familiar with Dave, he has a podcast which is titled No Snooze. So I think the whole perspective of no snooze, no quit, I think it obviously resonates well because it's all about not giving up, not stopping, not hitting that pause button, AKA not hitting that snooze button. First question we ask each guest is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
Absolutely, man. I pride myself on encouraging and inspiring every day. And I think every day is just an opportunity to give back to whatever community that you're involved in. And it can be something as small as, just saying hello to everybody in the morning. That's one of the best lessons I think my grandmother ever gave me. I remember I was very, very young and I happened to just not even be aware of this, right? So it's not like I was intentionally not doing it, but I remember I walked by one of her friends and I didn't say hello. And she kind of whacked my chin, how grandmothers do back in the day. So she whacked my chin and I kind of bit my teeth. I said, what was that for? And she said, you say hello to everybody that walks by you. So from then on, I said, you know what, Grandma, I got you.
I think some of those lessons where it's just something so simple. And to your point, obviously you were a kid, so you weren't consciously thinking about not saying hi to somebody. But what you just shared is something that, for our listeners, it's so simple to conceptualize, say hi, smile at people. But the reality is, unfortunately, and I'd love to get your 2 cents on this, I find that most people just walk by in life, first of all, not saying hello, but second of all, they're on their phone looking down. So to your story about your grandma, you just weren't paying attention. I think the other perspective in today's day and age is people are just not aware of it because they're literally locked in their screen.
100%. I think nowadays we've lost the ability to do exactly what you and I are doing, to conversate. And I think as human beings, we are, for lack of better words, we're bred to be around people, and we're bred to talk. And, social media and that stuff is fine. I use it a lot. But I'm also very strategic about how I go about it and how I use it. But I will say, on the flip side of things, there are times that I catch myself and I'm like, wow, I just kind of sat and lost myself in the scroll for 15 minutes. So that's a constant, I think, battle, just in 2023 going into 2024, and having a young daughter myself. She's only 3 years old. It's something that I'm extremely conscious of. But I try to instill those lessons in her now. And, even when she's walking by somebody, I make sure that she says hello and she says please and she says thank you, and she knows how to have a conversation, because with AI and technology that's out there, you can really sit back and kind of just coast, along the wave of not getting involved with that interaction.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think the reality is technology is going to play a bigger part, bigger role as we move forward. So going back to my theme and your theme of your company and your podcast, wanted to ask you if you have either a point in your life where you could have given up or given in, or if you have a no quit story of your own that you'd like to briefly share with our listeners.
I like that question, Chris. Yeah, I think for me it would definitely be my health journey. Two things just came to mind. The first one was with my mother. I grew up in a house of drugs and alcohol for the first 28 years of my life, but that wouldn't exactly be my story. That's more of my mom's empowerment. So I'll go back to me with my health journey. At the age of 16, I started noticing like a lot of pain in my stomach. I would eat, I'd have to throw up. I was going to the bathroom on average, probably 15 to 18 times a day after I would eat. So there was a lot of digestive issues that were going on. And I was a basketball player growing up, and I was pretty decent. I mean, not the best by any means, but I was a decent ball player, and I prided myself on working hard. But I basically went from like 180, 185 pounds all the way down to 153 pounds in 3 months. And the doctors were telling me, like, you're not going to be able to play basketball this season. Um, we need to really figure out what's going on. So they would run all these tests. They put me on 18 pills of prednisone a day, trying to figure out like what the inflammation was, and what was going on with my digestive tract. Fast forward a little bit, they end up doing a endoscopy, which is a camera down the throat, and then the colonoscopy, which is the reverse. And they ended up finding Crohn's disease. Now, the thing about Crohn's disease is they don't know exactly where it stems from. I have a cousin who has Crohn's, but also it's not very typical to be in your teens and be diagnosed with Crohn's disease. It's something that comes on later in life in your 40s and 50s. But now, I guess, full circle, it's a little bit more normal. So I was doing all these tests, and these doctors are telling me, you're going to live with this condition for the rest of your life. And I said, that may be true, but it's not going to affect, my everyday life the way it is now, because I just can't possibly move forward like this. Chris, I mean, to the point that like, I would have toilet paper in my backpack on trips, because if I needed to pull over, this is how bad, this was. I'm just trying to paint the actual picture for you, being fully transparent. It was ugly, man. And, it was very depressing point in my life. I was coming up on, trying to score my 1,000th point in high school, which is, a big accomplishment. And all these doctors would tell me, don't play. So in between quarters and halves, I'd run into the bathroom, and just try to get back on the court as soon as possible. So I guess in that moment, like, you really think to yourself, this is not good. And everyone's kind of telling you to give up, and you can do that. And just fortunately, I think through, the grace of God, and then along with what I've seen in my family, my father specifically is one that has never given up in his life. And I have a lot of family members that just work extremely, extremely hard. So when hardships come, really the only thing to do is, figure it out, take action, and attack. So I started studying diets myself. I never read like a book in my life, even in high school. I just kind of coasted. But I became knowledgeable on, health and wellness and kind of what worked for me. And, people would say, yeah, vegetables are healthy. Well, when it comes to Crohn's disease, like if you're eating raw broccoli, that's probably the worst thing that you could possibly eat, because those little seeds, they actually get in the ulcers and the lining of the colon, and it causes like an irritation, kind of like sandpaper on a wound. So you have to really study. So I would months and months and months log a food, see how it would feel 2 to 3 hours later. And I ended up building like a whole diet for myself. And I still follow that diet till today. And like I told you before, I just had a recent colonoscopy, which will be, 15 years later. And, there's really no sign of this Crohn's disease here. So, again, I mean, it's not a testament. I don't like to say it's a testament to me at all. I think there's a much higher power that guides all this. And I'm kind of just following the footsteps and trying to help somebody along the way.
Well, first of all, I appreciate your transparency in sharing that. But second of all, I have to disagree from the perspective that it is a testament to you from the foundation that you put in the work. So yeah, I know sometimes it's hard to toot your own horn, but I just want to give you honor because so many people receive news, whether it's health, family, job, you fill in the blanks. And at that point, you have a choice. You can accept it as it is and just say, this is going to be the next year, month, 5 years, or you can try to figure out a better approach to it. Now, I want to be clear. Positivity is kind of this thing that gets this, I guess, bad rep because people look at positivity as unicorns and rainbows and everything's perfect. I look at it exactly the opposite way, where regardless of what you're facing, you can face it with a positive approach. It doesn't mean in any way, shape, or form that it's going to get better, but it makes the process better if you're trying to find an answer or trying to find something that works. And clearly, you did that. So again, kudos to you, but honor to you for finding out what worked for you. But then secondly, you put the work in. Whether it's researching the diet, whether it's figuring out what worked. Got to ask you a follow-up question to that. During those challenging times, and being a 16-year-old has its challenges within itself, but then trying to play basketball and figure all that stuff out, was it your family? Was it your dad? Was it just kind of who you are as far as that no quit perspective that let you to just face everything with an attitude of you're going to find a way?
Oh, if I'm being honest with you, Chris, I I liked to live this fairy tale life. Like I like to portray that Dave Regina was perfect for a really long time. And it started back then. I had a lot of insecurities in myself. I was always a good person, I'd like to think, but I always cared about like my public image and persona. And again, I still care about it to this day. I think anyone who said, I don't care what people think, I think that's, a little overboard because obviously you want to put out a good product and stand by what it is that you believe in. But for a long time, man, I didn't really know how to deal with my vulnerabilities and the problems that were, in my life. I resorted to like, getting in fights and kind of acting up and, just doing like stupid things back then. But it wasn't until that I kind of had that humbling moment where it wasn't my life flashing before me, but it was a change in my lifestyle dramatically. Um, being a high school kid, I used to like, pride myself on being able to like chug a beer faster than somebody. But like with this health condition, like I couldn't do that anymore. And I couldn't be the cool, sarcastic, funny guy. So I had to like adopt this whole new like persona, which ended up being the real Dave Regina. Whereas prior to that, man, I was just like, all right, I look good. Like nobody knows what's going on in my family home with the, the stresses and anxiety of, my mother battling addiction, me kind of growing up with my father. So I hid all that stuff, man. And it wasn't until like, I had that real dose of a real life coming at me that started to like shift things for me.
I think you touched on so many important things, and again, going back to what I said before, I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability, but it's uncovering kind of who you want to be. And I think many of us encounter that and find out, I guess, who we are at different phases. And I think the reality is obviously we'd rather do it in our 20s than our 30s, or in our 30s than our 40s. But it's so much easier said than done once you identify, okay, this is who I want to be. This is the type of person I want to put out there. And I love how you prefaced it as put out that product, because reality is that's your product that you put out there. And it's not a product from, selling a t-shirt or a company. It can be, but it's first and foremost who you are as a person. And whether you're a parent, a spouse, friend, significant other, we all have those different roles in life. Fun question I ask each guest is, if you had to define yourself, but you could only pick one word, what word did you pick?
What's coming to mind is determined, but I really want that word to be undeniable. And I say that because, every year I pick a word And my word for 2024 is going to be undeniable. Um, that word to me, I think you can be great in a lot of things, but I think real success comes when others can actually describe you as undeniable. Chris showed up every single day, regardless of how he felt. Undeniable. Chris, as a father, showed up even when he didn't want to take his kids to practice. Undeniable. You stuck to your diet even when everyone else was out drinking and doing what they did. Undeniable. Somebody was disrespectful to you, you chose to be respectful. Undeniable. But the word that I guess originally came to mind is determined. I'm a very determined individual. But with determination, sometimes you make a lot of mistakes. And I've made a ton of mistakes along the way. I know I'll continue to make mistakes, but now it's about taking those experiences and turning them to lessons. A really, great saying that I love is every experience either is a blessing or a lesson. There's no in between, and even if something doesn't go right in your life, you don't have to, you could take a minute and harp on it and be down on yourself, but take it as a lesson and move on. So I guess how I would describe myself is determined. How I would want somebody to describe me down the line would be undeniable.
I love the one word. I've done that myself for the past, I want to say probably 8, 9, maybe 10 years. What was your word for this year, 2023?
It's nourish. Life moves quickly and we don't take the time to really water the things that need to be watered. So nourish was the word. And when I said that on my podcast back in January, I think I said the word about 150 times throughout the episode. It's funny when you do that stuff, man, and you put like words out there, you become very like, it's just a subconscious, and like in those moments, even in business where like, I want to flake and I want to get out of there. I run what's called a one-on-one meeting with all my team members. And I have 25 full-time team members. And every month I sit down with each individual. This is not something that I made up. Howard Schultz, Starbucks. So you got to give credit where credit is due. He said it's one of the things that changed his relationships in business. So for the past 3 years, I've been doing this with my team. But there are times that it's mentally tough to stay in these conversations. And I do it from like 10 to 12:30. So I have them back to back to back to back. And that's very strategic, but it gets tiring. So I catch myself at times being like, I want to finish this meeting up. And then like this year, there's been many times where I'm like, nope, stay in that moment and nourish this relationship right now. So I think the word thing and the whole theme is a great thing for people.
And we talked last week before we set up this recording, and you shared that story with me about your one-on-one meetings and doing a lot of work with college sports teams and companies now myself. I can tell you that is unbelievable that you do that. First of all, that you're consistent with it. Second of all, that you schedule it out, because I think you and I spoke about it last week, but my audience knows that I talk about all the time is you don't find time for anything, you make time. And I've seen and I've learned from some incredible coaches, coaching staffs, and just executives, employees, that they have certain things that are scheduled on their calendar so other things don't reprioritize what really is important. I think that's a lesson that we all can learn. So hopefully somebody that's listening to you today takes that into action, because we all have the same amount of time out there. It's no different for you, for me, for anybody out there. The question is, what do you make time for, and what do you prioritize? Because it's really important, especially like you said, you have 25 people on your team. There are other people that have, double, triple, quadruple that, and there are people that have a fraction of that. But the reality is we have that same amount of time during the day. It's just saying, okay, this is not only a priority, but I'm going to schedule this and I'm going to make sure that this stays consistent. And I think that's awesome that you did that. And I also want to just touch on that. I love that you touched on, or you gave credit to where you got that, because I always say if I were to sell my coaching or speaking to you for $100 and I could only keep what's mine, I'm literally keeping like $7, $8, $9. I've taken this from a
Yeah.
book, from a podcast. So I love that. But speaking of books, question we ask each guest is if you're currently reading something right now, or perhaps you've read something recently that you'd recommend to our listeners.
Yeah, man. I actually have these two right in front of me. So you know this Relentless, right? I've read this book. I'm actually reading it now for the fourth time. Tim Grover, and then I'm also reading The Dichotomy of Leadership by Jocko Willing. Um, I just actually finished up, and this one is awesome too. Very different than those there, but Brene Brown, Daring Greatly, and how the courage to be vulnerable transforms the way we live, love, parent, and lead. So Brene Brown there. So those are three that I'm kind of like, you know, working on now. I like reading multiple books at the same time because it gives me it's very much a reflection of my personality. You know, one second I'm a dog in the gym and I'm going crazy, you know, and then the next second I'm like the most vulnerable dad in the world painting my 3-year-old's nails. So you know, I like doing the back and forth like that.
It's funny that you mentioned that because myself, I'm always reading a couple books at a time. I have one usually in my book that I bring to and from work. I'll have one in my car. I have sometimes one or two in my office. And there's a bunch of people that say you shouldn't do that because your mind gets over that. But just like you said, for me, I love the idea of kind of taking different areas for different things. Wanted to ask, you brought up Relentless by Tim Grover, which is a fantastic book. Have you read Winning by Tim Grover?
Yeah, I love Grover's work, man. I think if you look at it from, I guess, just a sports perspective, if you're not in athletics, sometimes that message can be a little bit aggressive to people. So you have to have the ability to digest Grover's work. But I think those that can, you know, relate it more to life and his concepts of, you know, even when he talks about like the cleaners in his books and stuff like that, it's so relatable to business, you know, so you can make it relatable to anything. But it's kind of like the Goggins approach where it's not for everybody, but I think there's value for everybody if they can digest it.
I love that you just preface it that way because I think you probably said it better than I say it sometimes, but I could not agree more. I think even though there are people that perform in different arenas, and you just referenced Jocko Willink, who is a former Navy SEAL, so we all can't say, "Oh, this is exactly I know what he's talking about because I was a Navy SEAL." But it's being able to dissect that message and say, okay, even though Jocko or Goggins, their point of view is coming from a Navy SEAL or a military background, the lesson can be transferable to business, parenting, relationships, a 9 to 5 job, whatever it is. And I find that sometimes it's hard to be vulnerable enough to put yourself in the position and say, okay, I can't relate 100% because I was never a Navy SEAL myself, but I can relate to sales or parenting or something like that. And I think if you're able to put yourself in the right frame of mind, we can all learn invaluable lessons from all different people from walks of life.
I agree 100%, man. Well said.
The famous Jim Rohn quote, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." I'm sure you've heard of that. If I could grant you dinner tonight with any 5 people, dead or alive, that you could level up with, who would you pick?
Number one would be my grandfather, Mike Reggina. May he rest in peace. Never got the ability to really tell him the impact that he personally, you know, had on my life. My family members growing up, they've always compared me to him, which I appreciate because he actually was in the Navy. So he was real tough. I'm just fake tough. My beard is, you know, is what it is, but he was the real guy. So he would definitely be number one on that list. I would have to throw Michael Jordan on there for sure, just because he's, you know, my all time idol growing up. Um, I put Eminem on there. One of my favorite rappers, and I think expresses just like such a good message of vulnerability. The words that he uses sometimes are a little vulgar, but I think the message of like putting yourself out there and exposing yourself, is a beautiful thing. I think number four would be Martin Luther King Jr. This is a good list, man. I'm writing this down because I need this for myself. Just off of even what I do professionally at work, in providing the activities, programs, and services. A lot of the message that we put forth is derived from MLK's work.
I'm gonna throw a curveball at you just because I know I
Good.
can, because you're that type of guy. You got to have a woman for the fifth.
Well, what's funny is I'm actually going to choose my mother. My mom is. We had a very strenuous relationship growing up. But she is now actually just as of December 1st, 5 years sober.
That's
She's
awesome.
become she's become my best friend, a real idol and inspiration for me. And she did teach me a lot of over over the years of how to overcome adversity, not in the best way that she would have wanted to do it, but looking back, man, I would absolutely have her at that table and I would honor her. Um, you know, Probably first on this list. So definitely my mom.
Well, it's my third time now showing honor to you, because I think, kind of knowing you as long as I have, and we have a bunch of friends in common. Ironically, just to give a little context, Dave went to the same high school that my brother went to. They had the same high school coach. We coached and played on the same within the same AU organization. So Dave and I go way back, and we actually went to rival high schools different times. But I love how you prefaced it as, you had a challenging relationship growing up, because I've shared a little bit on this show, during my divorce with my ex, there's obviously challenges up and down, and with kids and things like that. It's impossible to go through life being perfect. But to me, it's those parents, those kids, those grandparents, grandkids that go through life and are able to put things in the right context and say, this was a challenging time, or she and I or he and I didn't see eye to eye at this point, but we were able to then mature and grow and realize that everything's not perfect, but it's about how you deal with those challenges. And I think the fact that, first of all, your mom's 5 years sober now is awesome. It reminds me of that idea. It's not, or that, excuse me, that quote, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And the fact that you guys are as close as you are today now, I think that probably says a lot, or not probably, it definitely says a lot about both of you and her. So that's awesome.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
We're going to switch to what we call our hot seat questions. And the only request we have of you is that you spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
All right.
Last meal, you can pick absolutely anything. What do you pick?
Honestly, steak and salad.
Favorite smell?
Mahogany teak wood.
That was so specific. Favorite sport?
Basketball.
Do you have an all-time favorite team?
Unfortunately, the New York Knicks.
What is your all-time favorite movie?
Titanic and 8 Mile. Two of them.
I thought you were kidding at first, but because you said 8 Mile after, I knew you were. Do you have an all-time favorite book?
Yeah, don't sweat the small stuff.
That's a great book. What is the favorite app you use on your phone?
My Google Calendar.
What is the background picture on your phone?
My daughter and I. And then I have a business phone where it says, it's a quote, and it says, "You are your only limit." There's two phones there, so that one and then that one.
I like that. What is your all-time favorite quote?
Always learning, always serving.
And what is that one song, no matter whenever you hear it, 4 o'clock in the morning at the gym, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or 10 o'clock at night, you automatically just turn it up and rock out to it?
Juicy, Biggie Smalls.
I like it. So we're always looking to add value, and I was curious if you have one or two people on social media that really put out good content that you could maybe reiterate or potentially introduce to our listeners.
Ed Milet, man, he changed my life. And I'm sure somebody has mentioned his content before, but I was going through a really dark period in my life in 2017, and I remember being on the treadmill, man, and I was in the gym, and something kind of came over me, and I said, like, let me try this podcasting thing. Like, I need something different than like the rap music that I was listening to, because I started going down the like a rabbit hole of like I would listen to rap music and then I'd find myself like in the club on the weekends spending a lot of money and like taking away from my wife at the time and my relationships. I just really wasn't making good moves, man. And I came across Ed's content and just the whole notion of like personal and professional excellence became something that like I made such a small switch in not listening to music but putting on his content. And honestly, he'll forever be my personal coach. I haven't met him, but I know everything about him, and it's funny that it's from all from content, man. So definitely Ed Milet would be number one, and then I think Lewis Howes, man. I think Lewis Howes does a really good job of bridging the gap of he really showed me how to interview. Like he was the first one that I came across that has taken the concept of making a podcast pretty much all about them, all about like the person who's creating the podcast and kind of shining the light on somebody else. And what that did for Lewis is it actually brought it back full circle to him. He's got one of the best platforms, in the world. So Ed Milet and Lewis Howes.
I'm just looking at the at my bookshelf here. Have you read Lewis's new book?
Not his new one, no, I'm not.
Definitely, just based off of who you are, I would definitely recommend that. It's called The Greatness Mindset.
Yes.
I really love his stuff. But going back for a second, something you said about Ed really stood out to me because you verbalize it the exact same way I do, where you said he's your personal coach, and then you kind of smiled and said you've never met him. And I have probably 4 or 5 of those people that are my personal coaches as well that I've never met. I've probably never even been in the same states, relatively the same time.
Yeah.
But the reason I say that is to a listener out there that may be going through a tough time or looking to just change something or try something new, and maybe you don't have the money per se to buy one of those really expensive courses or go to one of those 4 or 5 day retreats that are unbelievably expensive. You can find that quote unquote mentor or coach out there. And the way I did initially, just a very short, funny story, but Zig Ziglar was my all-time GOAT when it comes to personal development. And I actually have CDs of Zig's and that dates me, but I was able to take that. So the reason I said that, because you worded it so well, is in today's day and age with technology, it's so easy to find information. It's so easy to get podcasts, audiobooks. There are different Audible promotions where you can get it for free. It's putting that into action. It's taking that information and saying, okay, I learned this strategy, this idea. Now I'm going to put it into action. You're someone, Dave, that has taken action. So a question I wanted to put forth to you is, for a listener that maybe is struggling with that action step, do you have advice that maybe you'd offer to that person who's really teetering on the fence of, I have this information, I have a coach, I have this product or service, but now I need to take action, but they haven't done it yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. But I do think, this is pretty much everybody. It's all of us, and even somebody like yourself or myself, where, you take a ton of action and that that's the formula. Anytime I start something new, it's still the same problem and the same process, right? You battle the self doubt and that stuff. And I think the only thing that really kills that is keeping promises to yourself, right? Um, and the way that you do that. So I guess the real answer is to whatever it is that you want to do. I like, you know, habit stacking or breaking things down to very small incremental things. I'm sure like you preach all the time. But if you can't identify one action and then do that for 30 days, I don't think you'll ever be able to achieve anything in life. Right. So it could be something as like small as, you know, listen, I want to start cleaning up my life a little bit, right? If you can't get up out of bed and make your bed for 30 straight days, you're going to have a hard time going any further. So I think it's identifying like the smallest action possible and then achieving that every day, no matter what. Right? Like I see you're doing the cold plunge thing now. Like, and I'm sure that's a very mentally strenuous activity to be doing, and every day it does not get easier. But you're committing to a process. And even for me, when I was starting the podcast, man, the first thing I remember, it was just like, all right, you got to get a post up every day, you know. And then there were days that like I didn't want to get this post up, and I sat there for a month and I did it for 30 straight days. And some days I got no traction, and some days I got a lot of traction. You know, some days I felt like doing it, some days I didn't feel like doing it. So I think at times we overthink the process of, you know, getting things done and taking action. But I think it's identifying one small thing and then being able to do it consistently, regardless of how you feel for 30 days.
I love how you worded that because I think it's important. And for our listeners, obviously they hear my voice and see my stuff quite a bit. But why I love the guest episodes on Friday, because even though say the same type of things or often speak the same similar language with people, it's sometimes something that a guest says not only connects with me, but it connects with a listener. And I love how you said that small thing, but if you can't do something for 30 days, you know, that's not to combat your confidence or encouragement, but it's until you're willing to consistently do that today, tomorrow, the next day. And you shared it about your podcast, but you also said something that I really want to touch on because I know for a fact it's something I struggle with too. It's consistently posting things regardless of the traction. Now, anybody that tells you, and I think you'll agree with this, but anybody who tells you they could care less about having anybody notice them or having any likes or comments, I don't think anybody can genuinely say, I could care less about doing anybody responding, because if that was the case, I don't think that person would have a social media account. But the reality is, when you're getting a lot of likes, a lot of traction, a lot of comments, it's really easy to make that post the next day. When you post a story and you get hundreds of people that view it and forward it, and it's easy to say, okay, I'll do the next one. But what I love about some of the stuff that you do is it's about those days when you don't want to. It's about those days when you don't feel like doing it. You're tired, you're sick, you're just mentally not there. That to me is the preface behind that. And I'm not going to speak for you, but the no snooze concept, which is you just don't hit the snooze button.
Yeah. And just the name no snooze, you know, sometimes people, it's a misleading title at times because people think you shouldn't sleep. No, you should absolutely sleep. But the first thing that you see in the morning is that snooze button. So, you know, when we kind of came up with this concept, we took it very literal from that. You have two options, and you can go back to sleep on your dreams and aspirations, or you can wake up and attack everything that you do. When it comes to, you know, that podcast example, or really anything when it comes to content, you know, I've gotten to a place now, and being very transparent, you know, I've used all sorts of social media tactics and strategies and this and that, and I boost posts continuously to, you know, to make sure that my content gets out there and gets the vision that kind of I want it to get. So I'm always very transparent about that type of stuff. But you know, on the days that I don't want to post or the days that I don't want to do things, essentially what I'm saying to somebody is go out and go find somebody else's content. Don't look at my content because I'm not secure enough to put it out, right? So go buy somebody else's book, go listen to somebody else's podcast, which just is simply not me. So when I think of that, I'm like, I'm not going to let anyone else down. I'm going to post because I want you to consume my content. And that's been a really good, strategy and tactic for me that works. Whereas like, I don't have the largest following in the world, but I have a very consistent following that really does, love what I do. So it's not about me anymore. It's about letting those people down, and regardless of how I'm feeling in the moment, I never want those people to say, "Wow, man, Dave's got nothing for me today."
I love that, and I love the perspective on the no snooze, because it's the same thing with no quit, where people always say, "Oh, so you should never quit no matter what," and then people have given examples of, so whether it's drinking or drugs, or your business is losing money and you're going into hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. Obviously, there are certain things that you should quit, and to preface what Dave said, yes, you definitely should sleep on that. So, have to ask my follow-up question now for our listeners who want to not only find out more about you and your content, but also find out more about your podcast. Please give us some information where they can find all that.
Sure. We're on all audio and visual platforms for podcasting at No Snooze Podcast. That's also my Instagram name. And then my personal Instagram is at Dave, REGG, Dave Reg, which stands for my last name, Reggina, just shortened up. So you can find me pretty much anywhere on those two platforms.
And last question we have for you, Dave, the same question we ask everybody, is if you have some parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Well, first I want to say, again, man, I'm very grateful to people like yourself for, consistently putting out content like this and creating platforms for individuals. I think the personal professional development is something that's like, it really can be a drug, and it should be the best drug that's out here, and everybody should consume it. And it's not expensive. It doesn't have to be expensive. So I definitely want to say thank you to you, and then to I guess just to the audience, man. I think life is very short, and I think we all need to find things that we enjoy doing that provide impact back to others and a community of some sort. And what I mean by that is I've seen a lot of people that, even in my industry and local government, man, they go 30 years and they have a great career, but then, they retire and they have a heart attack, and they never took the time to do the thing that they love, right? Like if you love skiing, you should do more skiing, right? And then if you want to really make an impact, you should grab one of your friends and teach them how to ski. And the beauty of service in general, whether it's, through skiing or it's you at the local homeless shelter serving sandwiches, there's something to be said about us as human beings interacting with others and really dialing down and finding a way to be impactful. So if you're down in the dumps, man, that's the best thing for me to do, is always go out and do something nice for somebody. And I think that's something, to take away and apply for everybody.
I could not agree more. And I think there's a quote that I'm going to miss, but it's the idea of, if you're in a bad mood or having a bad day, do something for someone else, and it automatically lifts you up. So for our listeners out there, if you're not following Dave on his personal social media, definitely follow that. If you're not following the No Snooze podcast, make sure you follow that as well. I appreciate you, my man. I know that we will connect again soon, but thank you again for jumping on here.
Chris, man, thank you so much. And yeah, man, we're going to run this back, and we'll do it on my side of town.
I can't wait, brother. Thank you for listening to episode number 423. Dave was incredibly vulnerable, and I hope you got as much from him as I did. He shared some incredible advice on taking action and doing something for 30 straight days. With that in mind, I would like to personally challenge you as we end today's episode. I'm sure there's something in your life that you've wanted to try, change, or even start. Make today your day one and start. You can't have a 30-day habit streak overnight, but you'll never get to your 30th day without starting and completing day one. And remember, we rise by lifting others up.
And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.